Hi there, folks. Now, I decided for this week to do another book list, as you all love them so much. And as it's high summer here and the full-on holiday period is brewing, and many of you are either in the UK or are anglophiles planning on visiting the UK, I had an idea to do a list of books that really sum up what it is to be English. Now, I put British in the title because it kind of sounds better, but British, of course, includes Welsh, Scottish and Northern Irish books and authors, which would create an even bigger list than I have already got. And I already have 16. I might do separate lists for each of these UK countries in future, but this video will focus on English books alone. Now, some of these books I've mentioned quite recently, so I won't spend too long on those. I'll linger a bit longer on those I haven't mentioned much or for some time. Now, I'm not just sticking to novels either. I've included some non-fiction and a couple of plays. Now, before we start, I'll just quickly sum up what criteria I've used to choose these books, and I'll talk more about them as we go along. These are the English character and humour, the class system, society and manners, and the beautiful English countryside and its rich history. So let's get on with it, starting with the earliest. Now, for the very first one, I've chosen a play, as you can probably guess who it's by. Probably written in 1599, and of course it's by Shakespeare, and I've chosen As You Like It. Now, I'm sure I have a copy somewhere, but I haven't been able to lay my hands on it. But it's one of the first Shakespeare plays I really got to know quite well, along with A Midsummer Night's Dream and Macbeth. But I just have a very great fondness for As You Like It. And I've chosen As You Like It because it has this very pastoral, bucolic feel about it. It's if you don't know the play, it starts off in the court of Duke, and our heroine, unusually a female main character, is Rosalind, and she is the niece of the Duke. Now, he's not a particularly nice character, and she is very much under his thumb. And also, the man she fancies has just been banished from the court. So she decides to escape the court, dress up in disguise as a boy, of course, and take with her her cousin Celia. And they end up in the forest of Arden. And this is why I've chosen it, because the rest of the play is set in this forest, this very, very English countryside setting. So, as normal with Shakespeare, we're not only seeing the aristocracy, the upper classes, and their way of speaking, but of course, when they come into the forest of Arden, they come across lowly shepherds and shepherdesses and several other people who are kind of wandering around in this area. And it's a lovely comedy. And there's a lot of fun when Rosalind and Celia come across Orlando, who's wandering around. This is the one that Rosalind fancied and is now wandering around in the forest. And of course, as is usual with Shakespeare's disguises, he doesn't recognise Rosalind. And so she, has a bit of fun with him being in disguise. So there's a lot of comedy there. And there's a lot of talk about what it is to be in the country. One of the characters, Jaques, has a rather kind of negative viewpoint of wandering around in the country. So it's not just all sort of lovely, pleasant jolliness. And there's a shepherd and his lover who are having a bit of a tiff. And there's an elderly shepherd called Corin Actually, my father played in a Royal Shakespeare Company production in, must have been the early 90s. And it's just a lovely play, and all ends very happily and lovely, with everybody being paired off with their rightful partners. And it's just, I just find it, of all of Shakespeare's plays, and of course they're all kind of very English in many ways, even those set in Italy or elsewhere, but I just think it's the most English of Shakespeare's plays because of that countryside feel. And of course, the Forest of Arden was an area just outside Stratford-on-Avon that Shakespeare knew very well. And so he's talking about his own kind of backyard, you know, if you like, his own area, harking back to that because he spent, you know, most of his later life in London. So I just think it's a lovely play that conjures up 16th century life in rural England to a large degree. And next, we're into the 18th century, and I've chosen Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, or to give it its long title, The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling. And I have spoken about this one quite recently in the list of top 50 English novels, so I won't go on too much about this. But again, I've chosen this one because of its very bucolic feel. It's got a real feel of 18th century England, its countryside, its social conventions and manners, etc. So there you go. That's all I'm going to say on that one for the moment. You want to say hello? Yeah, come on then. There we are. What are you moaning about, hey? You've been complaining a lot about people walking down the street or people cleaning windows, haven't you? Okay, what are we doing next? Now into the 19th century, and of course I could not do a video about quintessentially English books without mentioning Jane Austen. Now I could have chosen any Jane Austen for this, and because they are all exceedingly English, but I've chosen, thank you, I've chosen Emma. This is my copy of Emma. It's one of my favourite Jane Austens, and again, I've talked about this fairly recently, but I just love it. It's all set in a little English town with a woman of the upper classes who believes she's a very good matchmaker. Again, of course, you know, as with all Jane Austen, it's very much about English manners, English society, the etiquette of the time, and of course it all goes terribly wrong for Emma and her matchmaking, but it's just lovely. It's funny, it's witty, as with all Jane Austen, and I love it. Coming into the Victorian period now, I have chosen a novel by Elizabeth Gaskell, and it's Cranford, and this is my lovely little copy that I'm rather fond of, and it was published in 1853. Again, it's another book with the setting of a small English town. In fact, she based Cranford on her own hometown of Knutsford in Cheshire. There's not a great deal of plot in it. It's more like a series of sketches, but based on various women in this town, many of them widows, spinsters. And again, it's an observation of the society of the time, and snobbery and manners and etiquette, and women who tend to gossip. So again, it's got that very 19th century feel of sheer Englishness. these women of the town visiting each other, which was of course part of that society where, you know, you had to make visits on other people and you had tea with them and you talked about other people and what they were doing in this very strong social structure in the town. So yes, if you want a kind of picture of English life in a small town in the mid 19th century, there you go, Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. Again, another author that I couldn't ignore in this particular list was Charles Dickens. I mean, you have to have Charles Dickens on a list of very, very English novels. And I've chosen for this one Great Expectations. And of course, I have talked about this one recently, so I won't go too much into this. It's very much a book about, again, conventions of society, what it means for a young boy who's sort of grown up in a very lowly background and then suddenly come into great expectations and an inheritance and suddenly has to become a gentleman. So that is very, it so very much throws into relief these ideas of what it is to be a gentleman in Victorian England. It's a great novel. I think it's, along with Nicholas Nickleby, this is my favourite Dickens. Now, time for a cup of tea with my very English tea service. Now then, next on my list, again, it's late 19th century. And again, I've mentioned this recently, and I don't have a copy, but I loved this book when I read it. And it's Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. The story of three men, three friends who decide to go on a holiday in a boat along the River Thames. They have a dog with them too. And it's just full of gentle English humour. And what is English humour? It's witty, it's eccentric and quirky, gentle sarcasm, and just generally funny situations. And we English love our dogs. There's a lot of fun with the dog Montmorency as well. And it's, of course, the setting is also wonderful. It's the River Thames. It's such an English setting as they go from London to Oxford. That very sort of straw hat boaters, men in jackets even on a warm day, and very middle class, boating the regatta at Henley. Can't think of many novels much more English than Three Men in a Boat. And talking of which, I can't find many more English plays than the following one. And this is my other play in this list. And it's The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. And I have it, this is a book with 3 Oscar Wilde plays in it, and it includes also Lady Windermere's Fan and An Ideal Husband, as well as The Importance of Being Earnest. And that label on it is my father's label. They are all, of course, all of Oscar Wilde's plays are just the epitome of Englishness at the time he was writing. It was first performed in 1895, and I think The Importance of Being Earnest is my favourite of all. It opened to rapturous applause and a standing ovation. One of my favourite films of all time is the 1952 film of The Importance of Being Earnest, with the wonderful cast, with Margaret Rutherford, Dame Edith Evans as Lady Bracknell, Michael Denison, oh, the wonderful Joan Greenwood. Oh, it's just sublime. If you have never seen the 1952 film, do watch that if you want to know a bit more about this play. It is quintessentially English, and it's the story of two men who are both kind of leading double lives and have both assumed the name of Ernest and are both wooing their own sweethearts under these names. But of course, this leads to wonderfully comic mistaken identity scenes. It is such fun, and it has, of course, it's Oscar Wilde. It has some of the wittiest lines in British drama. And one of my favourites is a line of Gwendolen, wonderfully played by Joan Greenwood in that film. It's just one of my favourite lines. And she says, "I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train." I love Gwendolen. But there are so many wonderful, wonderful, sharp, witty, sparkling comedy. And of course, it just summons up that very English humour. And I think another thing about the British character is our ability to poke fun at ourselves, and Oscar Wilde does that brilliantly, just as people did before, and centuries before. He pokes fun at our social classes, etiquette, manners, and all of that. And the cast of characters, I think even the names are just wonderfully English. John Worthing, Algernon Moncrief, Lady Bracknell, of course, Gwendolen Fairfax, and Cicely Cardew, and the governess called Miss Prism, who in the 1952 film was played by Margaret Rutherford. Oh, it's such a delight. It's such a delight. I think I could always watch that film and have a very happy hour and a half. So yeah, do catch that. And of course there are more recent films as well, but I think that one epitomises, is the best of the lot. Now into the early 20th century now, and I'm just going to talk about two children's books, neither of which I have copies of. Sad face. First, well, I do have a copy of the first one, The Wind in the Willows. Well, I hope I still have it. I'm still looking for it. Do you know what? The day I find my copy of The Wind in the Willows, you will be hearing about it, because it's just such a beautiful edition. Published in 1908, of course, by Kenneth Grahame. And the wonderful tale, again set along the River Thames, of Ratty and Mole, Toad and Badger, and all their wonderful adventures, and that wonderful feeling again of the English countryside and the wild woods, of course. And I think that quote quite early on in the book, where Ratty says, "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as messing about in boats." There is something, I think, very, very English about that, because I think we English, we love our rivers and we love our boats and boating, and also sailing, on the coast. We're an island. So I think that's it always strikes me as a very British thing. And of course, similar to Three Men in a Boat, which again is a very boaty book. It's a very English thing, the enjoyment of being on the water, whether it's in a rowing boat, in a punt, or a sailing boat, or a yacht, or whatever. I think we, as a British people, do love the relaxing idea of being on a boat. I myself have done a boating holiday on the Norfolk Broads. I absolutely loved it. I love rivers. So those two books, those Three Men in a Boat and The Wind in the Willows, are very special to me. But the other children's book, which I sadly don't have copies of, and I don't really know why, because they were very special to me when I was a child, are the Winnie the Pooh books. First Winnie the Pooh, published in 1926, of course, by A.A. Milne. Again, I think I've included Winnie the Pooh because it's such gentle English humour, and the characters are quirky, slightly eccentric. They each have the kind of very English characteristics, with the very sort of bossy, critical rabbit, and Eeyore, who's rather always down in the dumps. Plenty of those kinds of people in England too. But there's something about Eeyore that I absolutely love, though he's rather sweet with it. And of course Pooh and Piglet and their friendship. And it's also, the setting is the 100-acre wood is so English. I don't think there's a person in England who did not either read or have Winnie the Pooh read to them at some point. I'd be very surprised if there was. It's just one of those things that it's almost like a rite of passage to read Winnie the Pooh. And I think you can just sum them up as being full of English charm and whimsy. And I said 2 children's books, but there's actually 3, because my next one is also a very, very well-known children's book, published in 1937, and it's The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, why have I chosen The Hobbit for this? Because when Tolkien invented the character of the Hobbit, he based Hobbit's characters very, very much on the English. The kind of homely, ordinary English people, you might call them the backbone of England, the sort of those who just love to stay at home and do their work and love their homes and tend to their gardens. But when called upon, they actually have great inner strength to step up and find this great well of courage and bravery inside them. And I think that's why The Hobbit is just so popular and has this great charm to it, because we recognise the Hobbit in us, juxtaposed against the great adventurers of Middle-earth, and the dwarfs after their stolen gold, and the wizard Gandalf, and elves, and all these very high-minded people. But the Hobbit is very earthy, and as I say, homely, homespun against these high-minded characters. And that's what Tolkien was doing. He was talking about the ordinary English people. He was in the First World War, and I think he saw that ability to suddenly step up and act with bravery and courage in those ordinary working men who went to war. So there's a bit of that in it as well, but great humour as well. That's again a very self-deprecating kind of humour that is part of our English sense of humour. Next, coming up to 1996, another book I've mentioned quite recently. I won't go into it too much. It's Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding. I mean, it's very, very funny English humour. Again, that very self-deprecating humour, and full of wit, as opposed to earlier novels that are set more in sort of that middle or upper class kind of society of manners kind of book. We have here somebody who's just in a job and just trying to do all the ordinary things that generally people are trying to do: lose weight, drink less alcohol, stop smoking, and all that, and find a man, and all that in the setting of London and with all her London friends. And it just feels to me so incredibly English, very much English of the late 20th century. So I'm not going to linger too much on that. I've spoken about it quite a lot, so we'll leave that one for the moment. Another children's novel, which I've spoken about before. This is, I'm going to talk about Harry Potter. This is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the first of the series, of course, published in 1997, which took off and got a whole generation of children reading, which is wonderful. And I've put this into this list because I think the whole creation of the Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft is actually based on a very, very English school system. And I do know that people who have read this that are not English didn't realise that the houses that they are put into is actually a very English school thing. I don't know whether they still do it now, but they were still doing it when I went to school. As I remember when I went to my first secondary school, I was in a house, and my house, I remember the name, it was Grafton. And it was just a way of being grouped together, and you could play against each other in sports events and that sort of thing. I think it's died out to a certain extent, but that is a very, very English school system thing to be put into different houses in your school. And she used that to great effect in the Harry Potter books. But I think also you've got the very suburban area of the book where Harry grows up with his step-parents and that very, very ordinary house. And then, of course, you've got Diagon Alley, which is based basically on a very English medieval shopping street. And I think she drew on some some streets in London that still exist, that still have that kind of old feel about them. So yeah, she pulls from various very English sources to create the whole Harry Potter feel. The suburbia, the big school, and run like a boarding school, and Diagon Alley. So all very, very English. Now the last novel on my list, but don't worry, I'm going to mention a few more as well. But the last novel on the list of ones that I've read is this one, and it's The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. And this was published fairly recently in 2020. And it's great fun. Again, very, very witty English humour. Richard Osman, for those who don't know, he's very well known in England. He's a presenter, a man of great intellect and wit and comedy. He started writing novels. Well, this was his first one, actually, and he's written several in this series, which I really want to read. So first and foremost, it's a murder mystery, and we British, we English, love our murder mysteries. Don't worry, I'll be talking about the more famous one in a bit. It's about a group of fairly elderly residents of a retirement village, basically. And one of their hobbies is to look up cold cases of murder cases and try to solve them. But one day, of course, an actual real murder takes place in their village, and so they all set out to solve it. It's not only very, very funny and witty, but it's also extremely warm-hearted and full of great wisdom. It's a lovely, lovely feel-good book, as well as just being a delightful, humorous book to read. You know, it's his take on the English love of murder mysteries, but also the comedy of the characteristics of older middle-class English people who will love to sit over their cups of tea and discuss gory murders. So there you go. Yeah, that is great fun. If you haven't tried these books, then do. Now, I'm just going to go on to two non-fiction books, both of which I've been dipping into. They're very dippy into books. And the first one it's by Bill Bryson, and it's The Road to Little Dribbling, and it's More Notes from a Small Island. Funnily enough, I haven't read the first one, which is just called Notes from a Small Island. So I do want to go back and read that one, but this is great. It's Bill Bryson, despite being American, absolutely complete anglophile, lived in England for many years, and he writes so well about England. And this is just his observations of some of the places in England that he visits, and it's very funny. It's really very observant about England, not just its geography of places, but its people. As it says on the back, from Bognor Regis to Cape Wrath, he sets out to rediscover the wondrously beautiful, magnificently eccentric, endearingly unique country that he thought he knew but doesn't altogether recognise anymore. Yet despite Britain's occasional failings and more or less eternal bewilderments, Bill Bryson is still pleased to call this rainy island home. And not just because of the cream teas, a noble history and an extra day off at Christmas. So yes, while he observes these places in a wonderfully witty and warm way, he also does have a little jab at times at some of the changes that have happened over, and you know, the way things have in places been spoiled. You know, some of the bête noirs, caravan parks and ugly buildings and various places where change is not so much for the better. But it's a great read, and I think he really does have that objective eye and is able to really look at Englishness and, and really point it out. So I'm really enjoying that. But the other one that I'm also really enjoying, and I want to quote from this because he's so funny. This one you may not have heard of so much. It's by Stuart Maconie, and it's called In Search of Middle England, Adventures on the High Tees. Stuart Maconie is one of those kind of all-rounders. I think he's mainly known as a radio DJ. He's been a television presenter. He works mainly in the field of popular culture, music. I first came across him when he co-presented a radio show on Radio 2 with Mark Radcliffe, which I absolutely loved listening to. I think he still does a programme with him on another radio station. But anyway, yeah, he's one of those people, but he's not just that. He's very, very, again, very erudite, very funny, very witty. The book is basically Maconie's kind of investigation into just exactly what is meant by the term Middle England. And I just want to read fairly long, if you don't mind, a quote from the beginning of the book, because he really does sum up the idea of Englishness in a very funny way. Middle England, it's not really a place. It's more a certain kind of Englishness, one distilled to its very essence like sloe gin, dark and potent. Granted, it's not the only kind of Englishness. There's the raw, bold, virile, doomed northern variety composed of jutting crags, sleet, Joy Division, Ted Hughes, roaring winds and silent foundries. There's the rich, strange otherness of the deep south with its shanties, tin mines, smugglers, witches, poldark and pasties. But Middle England is different. Comfortable, maybe, if you call flooded cathedral towns and post-apocalypse Slough comfortable. Straight-laced, yes, if your definition includes Cromwell Street, Gloucester. Cosy, perhaps, in the way that the gruesome feral ritual of mayhem and bloodletting that goes on every Sunday night in the county of Midsummer is cosy. It is not just the literal middle of England, not just its ample, well-fed midriff rising and falling in a post-Sunday lunch snooze across the Chilterns, the Cotswolds, the Mendips and the Peak District. It is a state of mind. I would use the word psychogeography, but they don't talk like that here. They call a spade, unless, of course, they mean the edging iron or the Dutch hoe. Now, not everyone will get those references. Some of them you really do have to be English to know. But he really sums up some of the differences of Englishness across the country there. And it's great fun. Yeah, if you want to find out more about the English, I think that's a great fun read. But what I want to just do also is, because I am very, very aware that some of you will be saying, wait a minute, what about? And of course, I generally talk about books that I've read on this channel, but there are, I know, some very, very English books that I haven't mentioned yet. So I'm just going to talk about those. And of course, Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh will be one of those books, and many of you will be screaming at me. And of course, that was made into a brilliant television series in the 70s. I think it was the 70s. Actually, I've just looked it up and it was 1981. I was close. But yeah, it's such an English novel, and it's one of those ones I really must read at some point. And very much with themes of Catholicism, but also great nostalgia for the age of English aristocracy, where the main character is friends with somebody from a great family who live in a big mansion. But it's published in 1945, so at that time where that kind of upper-class England was kind of fading away, really. The other novels that I really want to read, these novels, extremely English and extremely funny, are the P.G. Wodehouse, Jeeves and Wooster novels. He wrote lots of these. They started out as short stories, I think, starting in 1915, and then later became longer novels, and just these really wonderful adventures of a very upper-class man and his valet, Jeeves, who is in fact cleverer and more wise and worldly than Bertie Wooster himself. So it plays on that theme of the upper class twit, really. And they are very, very funny, and they were brought to life in a television series starring Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie, which were very, very good. And my mother and I enjoyed watching those enormously while she was alive. So yeah, those are great books that I really would like to read those at some point. And another author I should mention, we mentioned before, the English love of the murder mystery. So of course I have to talk about Agatha Christie. Now, I have read quite a few Agatha Christies, But I looked up, I sort of did this Google search and I said, which is the most English of Agatha Christie novels? And what came up was A Murder is Announced. And of course, this is a Miss Marple one. And I think this really does sum up Englishness. It's set in a little made-up fictional village called Chipping Cleghorn. And of course, around here, there are a couple of towns with that name, Chipping, Chipping Camden and Chipping Norton, just down the road. So I think she's based that very much on towns in this area of the world. And of course, that Miss Marple being this kind of genteel little old lady who turns out to be a brilliant sleuth, is just somehow brilliantly English and eccentric, and set against this kind of these horrible murders set against this very cosy background. Yeah, so I think we have to talk about, we have to have mentioned Agatha Christie in this. And a couple of honourable mentions. I didn't mention Middlemarch. Again, I've talked about that one recently, but that again is a Victorian novel set against the very English countryside backdrop. And also, if we go right back in history, I could talk about Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales back in, 14th, 15th century? And again, a very sort of bucolic story of a set of pilgrims on their way to Canterbury and telling various tales. Also very much part English history and literature, that book somehow. So there we go. That is my list of books that sum up Englishness. And what can we surmise from that is exactly Englishness. And I think, from what comes out of these novels, I think as regards to English history, we talk about, those very, very strict kind of social manners and etiquette of the 18th, 19th and early 20th century that sort of faded away somewhat in the later 20th century, and the class system that, although again has kind of, we've sort of dropped the class system, but the class characteristics are still there. Shush! Depending on kind of where you come from or who your ancestors were. There's the English sense of humour, the very self-deprecating humour, but very witty humour, sarcastic humour, irony of like Jane Austen. And there's the various things and hobbies that the English love, afternoon tea, boating, beer, and of course our wonderful English countryside, as many of these books are set against. And we have such a rich variety of countryside, despite the fact that we're quite a small country. I'm always amazed at the rich diversity of countryside we have. We've got moorland, we've got mountains, we've got forests and heathland and just lovely vales and hills, and I don't have to go too far from where I live to see a lovely view. So all that is encompassed all together in these books. Well, she's ready for her dinner. Oh yes, you heard me say that word, didn't you? So there we go. I just thought it would be a fun thing to do, to have a look at some books that really sum up what it is to be English. I was born in the Isle of Man, though I actually count myself as Manx, but I've spent my life from the age of 2.5 in England, so I count myself as very, very English, with ancestors from Yorkshire, Lancashire, Staffordshire, and also Ireland. I hope you've enjoyed that, and do tell me some, if I've missed out some books, because there are so many books that really sum up that kind of Englishness. So do let me know if I've missed out any that you think should be on this list. And also tell me what your idea of Englishness is. So that is it for now. We will be back soon. I think I'll be doing a book review next week. And then I must do another A to Z series one, but I just thought it would be fun to do this one first. So that's it from me and Tilly. We're off to get some dinner for the dog. Gosh, suddenly after all that, I fancy some fish and chips. Bye for now.